that you all summarize your prepared statement. We'll start with Mr. Kelly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. Thanks to you and to Congressman Sherman for your remarks. Chairman Royce, Congressman Sherman, committee members, it's been 2 years since the committee last met to hear testimony on the President's Export Control Reform Initiative. A lot of work has been done in the intervening period. I'd like to start by thanking the committee on behalf of the State Department for its bipartisan support throughout this process. As the pace of technological advance accelerates and as technological capability spreads around the world, the need to update our export controls is increasingly urgent. We're no longer in an era in which a handful of countries hold the keys to the most sensitive technologies, as was the case during the Cold War. Today, a whole range of nations have advanced technological capability. At the same time, because of the diffusion of technology, many U.S. companies must collaborate with foreign partners to develop, produce, and sustain leading-edge military hardware and technology, and their survival depends on it. But because our current export controls are confusing, time-consuming, and many would say overreaching, our allies increasingly seek to design out U.S. parts and services, thus avoiding our export controls and the end-use monitoring that comes with them in favor of indigenous design. This threatens the viability of our defense industrial base, especially in these austere times. Our current system has another problem. It can prevent our allies in theater from getting the equipment and technology they need to fight effectively alongside our troops in the field. The system has its basis in the 1960s and hasn't undergone significant updates since the early 1990s. It's cumbersome, complex, and incorrectly controls too many items as though they were crown jewel technologies. And what that's meant is that there's been an inordinate amount of agency resources, both in terms of licensing and compliance activities, that have been expended on nuts and bolts as well as our real crown jewel technologies. In November 2009, President Obama directed a White House task force to identify how to modernize our export control system so that it will address the current threats that we face, as well as account for the technological and economic landscape of the 21st century. His direction was grounded in national security, with the goal of putting up higher fences around the items that deserve the greatest protection, while permitting items of lesser sensitivity to be exported more readily when appropriate. To address the problems the task force identified, they recommended reforms in 4 key areas: licensing policies and procedures, control lists, information technology, and export enforcement. The President accepted the recommendations, and since early 2010, agencies have been working very hard to implement them. Much of the agency's efforts have centered on revising the U.S. munitions list and commerce control list. This reform will draw a bright line between the 2 lists using common terms and control parameters. This will help our exporters determine far more easily which list their products are on. The reform will ensure that those items of greatest concern to us from a national security and foreign policy perspective will remain on the USML and thus be subject to the most stringent licensing requirements, while items of less sensitivity will be moved to the CCL. I want to emphasize a key point. Items moving to the CCL are going to remain controlled. They're not being decontrolled, but in specific circumstances, they'll be eligible for export under Commerce's more flexible licensing mechanisms. I'm confident that the revised list will permit State to continue to perform its national security and foreign policy mandates in export licensing. I'd also like to note that we're making tremendous progress in the effort to rewrite the categories. We published 12 rebuilt USML categories in the Federal Register for public comment. The proposed rules for the 7 remaining categories have been drafted and are either undergoing or awaiting interagency review so that we can then publish them for public comment. On April 16, the Departments of State and Commerce published companion rules that implement the revised USML categories 8 aircraft and 19 engines. This is the first pair of series of final rules that put in place the rebuilt export control lists. Our goal is to publish the revised USML in its entirety on a rolling basis throughout this year. In the last phase of our reform effort, we'll need legislation to bring the initiative to its logical conclusion by creating a single licensing agency. The administration hasn't yet determined when to approach this effort, but we will fully engage our oversight committees and know we can count on your support when we do so. On that note, one final point I want to make is that this hasn't only been an interagency process, it's been a cross-government process. Over the course of the past 3 years, we've had the opportunity to work closely with the committee, with many others across the Congress on both the broad strategic questions of national security and the finer technical details of our proposals. Our work together shows what we can achieve together. I'm very grateful for your bipartisan support for this initiative and look forward to working closely with you on the remainder of the reform effort.